considering it is a dark academia book, I feel like the setting just felt like a totally new spin on dark academia. Next is a book that, I'm not gonna lie, I think everyone should read. It seems like the type of thing teenage girls dream about and write fanfiction about, to meet like some famous musician and have him fall in love with you. So that, I feel like that's why it's giving like fanfiction energy. Let's talk about everything I read in October and November. I only read one book in October. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. I was just like busy with some personal stuff. But in November, I got back on track and I read 4 books. So I just thought, let's combine both of these months and let's talk about the 5 books I read in October and November. If you're new here, hi, my name's Natalia and I make bookish videos on this channel. So if you're interested in that, please consider subscribing to my channel. And I would really appreciate it if you liked this video as well. So yeah, let's get started. The first book that I read was an arc called The Book of Autumn. And I wanted to love this so badly because the idea itself is very interesting and unique. We've got this magical school tucked away in the New Mexico desert. Considering it is a dark academia book, I feel like the setting just felt like a totally new spin on dark academia, because I feel like when we usually think of dark academia books, the first thing that comes to our mind is like, this very like gothic setting. But here we've got this New Mexico desert. Like, it was just so exciting at first. So the plot centers on Stella, who reunites with her ex-boyfriend Max to investigate some strange magical disturbances at their old academy. I just feel like this book was kind of a slog to get through. First of all, the constant footnotes completely broke my reading flow. I don't mind footnotes, but like usually the books have like a few of them, but this book just had constant footnotes. And sometimes it was just like other characters' thoughts were also added to the footnote. Like, I don't, there was just so many of them were definitely unnecessary. And I feel like it really just broke my reading flow. Having a few would be fine just to like expand on some things, on some of the lore from the world, this magical world. But like I said, there were even footnotes of just like some side notes from other characters. It just became way too much. And then also the tone, it's the tone of the book. It tried to sound so academic and scholarly that it just often felt more like reading some academic research rather than a fantasy story. And I feel like after a while it just became a little exhausting. Like, I know that dark academia is about academia, but I don't know, the tone of this book was quite exhausting to read, I'm not gonna lie. The romance in this book had so little chemistry. I feel like it just could have been left out entirely. Maybe it was added because it was expected and not because it added anything to the story. I don't know. And the characters themselves were not particularly captivating. The protagonist was really forgettable. Also, the love interest, Max. So basically, he's like a cowboy. So it is a very fun concept because we've got a cowboy in a dark academia fantasy setting. It sounds like so fun and unique. He could have been such a memorable character, but he ended up being so bland and forgettable. Like, just the whole investigation was painfully slow. The magic system was confusing, and just in general, I almost DNF'd this book. I did read it till the end just because it was an arc, and I wanted to give my honest opinion. So I gave it 2 stars. I'm sorry. I feel like I rarely give books 2 stars. I feel like it is quite a strict rating. The first book I read in November was A Theory of Dreaming, which is the sequel to A Study in Drowning, which is like a dark academia fantasy book with a touch of mystery. A Study in Drowning was one of my top reads last year, so I'm not gonna lie, my expectations were quite high. I ended up giving it 4 stars, I believe. So, it was not as good as the first book, which I gave 5 stars, but it was still a pretty solid read. The things that I liked, definitely the writing. It's so stunning. The author, Ava Reid, has this like soft lyrical way of writing that's just so immersive. And even when the plot slows down a little bit, I usually don't mind it because the atmosphere is doing all the work. Also, getting chapters from Preston's POV was a nice surprise because we didn't get chapters from his point of view in the first book. So that like added a lot of depth to the story and it helped me connect with his character more. So I loved that. And Effie is still one of the most relatable characters I've ever read about. I feel like the author does an amazing job at depicting Effie's like mental health issues and internal struggles, her anxiety, her self-doubt and all of that. I just really appreciated how honest and vulnerable this portrayal felt. And like I said, it just felt very relatable. Effie is one of the most relatable characters I've ever read about. I see so much of myself in her and in like her thought processes. So this is one of the reasons why I love this series so much. And also, Effie's relationship with Preston is another highlight of this book. It's not dramatic or angsty, it's just so soft and supportive. It's just like two people just trying to be there for each other, even when everything feels confusing and fragile. I really appreciate how gentle their romance was. They do have their ups and downs, but you could just feel that they love and care about each other so much. But the pacing was definitely slower than the first book. And also, I feel like the dream mechanics, because in this book we focus a lot on dreaming, I feel like the dream mechanics were a bit confusing and like underexplained. Like this whole concept felt a little bit vague to me. I get that dream logic is supposed to be a little surreal and like strange. There were times when I was like really unsure what was happening or what the rules were. So that lack of clarity, I guess, pulled me out of the story a little bit. Still, I loved being back in this world. And I feel like the first book definitely could have just stood on its own. Like, it did not need a sequel. But the author decided to write a sequel. And in a way, selfishly, I'm glad that happened, even though it's not perfect. But I'm just glad that I get to spend more time in this world and with these characters. Yeah, like I said, I give it 4 stars. I don't think it's as gripping as the first book, but if you enjoyed reading the first book and you don't mind like a little bit slower type of fantasy that is like really character driven and focuses a little bit more on the introspective side of the story, then I think you will still enjoy this sequel and this entire duology. Next is a book that, I'm not gonna lie, I think everyone should read, and it's Anxious People by Fredrick Backman. At first, the setup of this book feels a bit chaotic. I mean, we've got this failed bank robber who takes a bunch of people hostage during an apartment viewing. It sounds like some chilly thriller or whatever, but it's really not. It's a story about being human and just like trying to figure things out and just trying to survive this world. I'm not gonna lie, it took me a while to connect with these characters, at least some of them. Or I would say majority of them. We're introduced to them like very slowly, and I'm not gonna lie, some of them are a bit annoying at first. But by the end, I genuinely liked all of them, in a way. I mean, they just felt so real, and their growth over the course of the story was so satisfying to watch unfold. The structure of the book is quite interesting. It jumps around a bit, it's non-linear, so at first it might feel a little disorienting, but once everything starts to come together, it just clicks and it just makes sense. And like the way each character's backstory ties into the bigger picture is so clever, and it makes the emotional payoff feel really earned. So even if at first you're a little bit like, what's happening? You're a little bit confused, I would say just keep going because it will all make sense in the end. What also stood out to me was how well this book balances humor with heavy topics. So it obviously deals with some like pretty heavy stuff, but in a way it never feels like depressing or overwhelming. I mean, this story in general, there's a dry, sometimes cheesy humor running through it, and that contrast like really lightens this book a little bit. It just makes it not so dark and depressing. The reason why I said I think everyone should read it is just because this book is literally just about being human. It's one of those stories that make you stop and remember that everyone's going through something, even if they don't show it. And I just feel like sometimes we all need to be reminded of that. And, we just need to be reminded that we're all just human and we're all trying our best to survive. And I feel like that book really portrays this feeling so well. And I ended up giving 4.5 stars. Like I said, the humor was a little bit cheesy and maybe the structure was a little disorienting at first. So maybe it was not a 5-star read, but it's definitely still one of the best books I've ever read. Next, I read Lock Every Door, which is a thriller by Riley Sager, and I literally devoured that book. It was so thrilling and like so fun to read. In this book, we follow Jules, who lands a job apartment sitting in this old fancy New York building. She is like kind of struggling financially, and this seems like just such easy money. So she takes this job, obviously. But almost immediately, some things just start to feel off. First of all, there are some strange rules that she has to obey. And then also other people living in that building suddenly start disappearing. So the atmosphere in this book is so good. The building, this old building, has this eerie gothic vibe that totally sets the mood. There was like just always a little bit of tension and curiosity, and that really kept me turning the pages. The pacing was also strong. I feel like I never felt bored while reading this. The story just moved quickly and kept me hooked from start to finish. I would say my slight issue is that the characters just felt, a little flat. Like they just could have been a bit more fleshed out, especially the protagonist Jules. She wasn't like bad, but yeah, like I said, she could have been a bit more fleshed out. And same with some of the side characters. They just didn't leave much of an impression. They were just kind of there. And the plot was, I felt that it was definitely shocking. I did not see it coming. And I feel like it made sense. It just tied everything together in like a very nice way. I personally liked the plot twist and I felt like it made sense. Like it wasn't super ridiculous. Was it a little bit unrealistic? Maybe. But I still felt like I've read way more stupid and unrealistic plot twists, and this one is not one of them. So overall, I think that Lock Every Door just gave me exactly what I was hoping for. A fast, creepy thriller with the haunting setting and a gripping mystery. So if you are in the mood for a thriller like that, maybe you should go and check out Lock Every Door. Okay, and then we have the last book on my list, which is Sounds Like Love by Ashley Poston. I gave it 3.5 stars. It was cute, but it's definitely not my favorite from Ashley Poston. So I've actually read before. I've got it here on my shelf. I don't want to take it out, but I've read The 7 Year Slip and The Dead Romantics. and both of them were 5-star reads for me. I love these books so much. So yeah, I was definitely hoping that this one might also be a 5-star read, but yeah, it was not. It was 3.5-star read. First of all, the premise is super sweet. It's about two people who can like suddenly start hearing each other's thoughts, and they also hear this like melody inside of their head, but it's like an unfinished melody. So they just think that, okay, maybe if we just team up and finish this melody, this song together, then we will stop hearing each other's thoughts. Well, overall, it was a very touching story, and I appreciated how it explored the characters' inner struggles alongside the cute romance. The setting was lovely too. It definitely feels more like a summertime read, not a fall or winter type of read. It has this like summery, small town, beachy setting. So yeah, I feel like it would be best to read during the summer because the summer vibes are really strong in this book. So okay, all of that was nice. So what did I not like about this book? I just feel like it just dragged a little bit, and I don't really know why, but I just didn't feel as invested as I did with the 7-Year Slip or the Dead Romantics. I think it's just something about the characters or the story itself. It just didn't grab me the same way. And also there is like some like pop culture references in this book. I feel like maybe a little too much. It just felt a little forced. I get what it's trying to do, make the book feel current and relatable, but it felt a little too on the nose. And I have to say, so both of the characters are musicians, but our protagonist is a songwriter, and then the love interest, the male love interest, he is like a famous musician. So I don't know why, but this whole like Sebastian being famous thing made it feel a little bit like reading fan fiction. Like, I'm not saying that the writing itself felt like fan fiction, but I just feel like the setting and some of the situations themselves felt a little bit like fan fiction just because, you know, he's like famous and, you know, he's like trying to not be seen outside by his fans. Whatever, our protagonist's best friend is like completely obsessed with him. So yeah, I'm not saying that fan fiction is bad or whatever, but I don't know, it just felt so funny to me. It seems like the type of thing teenage girls dream about and write fan fiction about, to meet like some famous musician and have him fall in love with you. So that I feel like that's why it's giving like fan fiction energy. Still, you know, it was a cute read. It was obviously nothing groundbreaking, but if you're in a mood for something like soft and emotional, you know, I can still recommend it. But if you have not read The 7-Year Slip or The Romantics, I would probably start there because, like I said, I do think they are a little bit better than this book. But again, it was not bad. It was really cute. Okay, so these were all the 5 books that I read in October and November. So if I were to pick my favorite, I would definitely go for Anxious People. Like I said, it was such a good book that I think everyone should read. So if you're going to check out at least one book from this video, maybe you should go and check out Anxious People. Unless you're into some other types of books. That is it for this video. Don't forget to like it and subscribe to my channel. And I guess I'll see you in the next video. Bye!